but we have a shared stake, and we all have a role to play in addressing and resolving rule of law issues wherever they appear. Our constitutional, legal, and political systems generally reflect high rule of law standards, and that is something to be proud of. However, in light of the serious challenges we face today, there is no room for complacency. It was, it is, and it will remain important that we are critical of one another. But perhaps, most of all, we must have the courage to be critical of ourselves. And as Minister, I welcome the constructive contribution made by the Council of Europe to improving our legislation and policy. Take, for example, the very first Venice Commission report on the rule of law situation in the Netherlands, published in 2021, at the request of the House of Representatives of the States General. This report contained guidance for improving the individual legal protection offered to citizens of the Netherlands after the child care benefit scandal. The experts provided us with well-founded suggestions, which we took to heart. And the Council of Europe is there to hold up a mirror. And let me be frank. What we saw was painful. And this is, however, no reason to just ignore it. And we know that our institutions and our policies are not perfect. And an important lesson is that the rule of law never functions perfectly. A state governed by the rule of law is not a state where mistakes are never made, but one where mistakes are learned from. All over Europe, we see cases where the resilience of rule of law safeguards is being tested. Shortcomings concerning the key principle of the independence of justice become more evident every day. And what we need is a strong commitment to execute judgments of independent and impartial courts at the national and international level. Sooner or later, every government will have to deal with court rulings that are not fully in line with government policy. And even then, or especially then, it is our duty and obligation to uphold and strengthen the rule of law. And when it comes to cooperation between countries, we need an effective and rules-based European system. Without this, judicial cooperation is impossible. The European Court of Human Rights is also of vital importance to the rule of law. And the failure to execute judgments in a timely manner can undermine the credibility of the convention system. Such failures must be confronted in an open and determined manner. Another challenge where cooperation is absolutely vital is the fight against organized and subversive crime. And crime is increasingly undermining the safety of our society and our open economies. The international drug trade involves huge amounts of criminal money, brutal violence, and intimidation. We can no longer be naive about this. We have to defend our democratic rule of law against this menace. In the Netherlands, the fight against organized and subversive crime is being ramped up on all fronts. In our investigative system, in our cooperation with international partners, and in the involvement of all of society. And the Council of Europe can and should also play an important role in this fight. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are at a crossroads in European history. And today, more than ever, we need to stand together as Europeans. And we can truly be proud of what we have achieved together. And at the same time, we have to realize there is still tremendous progress to be made. And our predecessors have cleared the path, making it possible for us to deal with new challenges, and they are expecting us to do so as well. timely, and decisively. And at the same time, our children and our grandchildren are watching our every step to make sure to grant to them the freedoms and benefits as Europeans we experienced, and to fulfill the ambitions of the European promise. As one of the great legal schools of all time, the Dutch and The Hague-based Hugo Grotius once said, "Liberty is the power that we have over ourselves." And it's now up to us to fight for these liberties. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go to work. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to you, Minister Weerwind, for your contribution. And as you've mentioned, our predecessors have cleared the path. And I believe as well our keynote speakers, you have cleared the path for, I think, a great panel discussion we may now have about these issues that you've all discussed and brought up in the past 20 minutes or so. So I would like to ask you kindly to take your seats in the plenary once again. And of course, Mr. Cox, you will remain here. And I would like to ask the two other panelists to join us on stage, please. So we are joined today, of course, by the President, Mr. Tini Cox, and Professor Dr. Barbara Omen, Professor in Human Rights at Utrecht University, and also President of the HZ University of Applied Sciences. So welcome. Thank you very much for being here. And of course, Bob Dane, who is a Senior Research Fellow at the Klingendahl Institute and a Russia and Eastern Europe expert. Now I would like to start with a short opening statement from each of you, and then we can have a, I would say around 15-20 minutes panel discussion, of course joined by Q&A from the audience later on. Barbara Omen, would you like to have the floor first, please, with your opening statement? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and also to all the previous speakers who addressed so clearly and so well the role and the importance of the Council of Europe. What I'd like to say at this momentous occasion is related to a discussion that my mother had with her mother, my grandmother. When she turned 75, she asked her mother, if there's one day in your life you could do again, what day would it be? And it's an interesting question, and somehow my mother asked or expected my grandmother to speak about having her first salary or her wedding or the children born. But instead of that, my grandmother said, well, if I could choose one day in the life again, I'd choose a very normal day where you children came home and you came back from sports and where everybody was talking and we were all eating together and there was washing to do, a normal day. And I think in commemorating 75 years of the Council of Europe, I would like to talk about the everyday impact of the Council of Europe. Because of course, here we speak about the events that have shocked us all. Russia last year, the big moments in the history of the Congress, its founding here in The Hague, its expansion to at some point 47 states, the Istanbul Convention, the inclusion of the rights of minorities, the work on the death penalty, all very big and important. But looking from an everyday perspective, I think of the place in the Netherlands where I live, 38,000 people, a place called Middelburg, and how we, 10 years ago, when the Council of Europe and the European Court of Human Rights received the Four Freedoms Award, decided to make a series of small films about the everyday impact of the European Court of Human Rights. And we filmed a normal family with children going to a religious school who was protected by the right to education in the European Convention on Human Rights. And we filmed someone who was concerned about a skater, who was concerned about his privacy and about cameras in the everyday atmosphere, and who was protected in this concern by Article 8 of the European Convention. We filmed someone with psychiatric problems who, in being put in confined care, had an independent test of that decision because of a European Court of Human Rights decision. And we could have made films about each and every person in this small country, one of the 46 member states. It could have been about the rights of journalists. It could have been about children and their rights in divorce cases. It could have been about the right to a fair trial. And to me, this is a very important point, that the Congress in its existence has strengthened the rights of each and every of the 675,000 citizens that we have in the Congress and in the 46 countries that the Congress now has. And in talking about both looking back and the future, strengthening the upholding of these rights amongst these people, to me, seems crucial. So the work that's been done in the field of human rights education is crucial. I remember in one of my classes teaching human rights that I had a ball and I asked students to, one by one, name every 46 of the member states of the Congress. And of course, it's easy for the first 15, and then it became increasingly difficult. Now it's 46 instead of 47. I also remember a discussion with primary school children on the rights of privacy and security and how to weigh them. And it seems to me that these kind of discussions with everyone, everywhere in the Council is really important. One of the most impressive developments I've found over the past years is, for instance, also the rise of human rights cities. So the fact that in Turkey, in Italy, in the Netherlands, in Spain, you now have cities that really look what they can do locally, close to home, in upholding the Council rights is really, really important. Also in addressing these enormous challenges that we have at this point of time. And of course, these challenges are there. If I look at where we've come in 75 years and what the challenges for the future are, to me, there's still an enormous challenge in ensuring that the promise of the rule of law, human rights, democracy is upheld for each and every person in the member states, in particular when we speak about, for instance, gender rights as an important issue. It's really important to look at the role of digitization, of artificial intelligence in human rights protection in the everyday life. And so, of course, as a main existential threat to all of us, our children, our grandchildren, but also us today, there's thinking about what upholding human rights means in addressing the climate crisis that we face. So I think in looking at all these challenges, it's important to connect the everyday protection of human rights with the big, big challenges that we face. And if I read again the preamble of the European Convention of Human Rights, where the founders of the Convention, and to a large extent also of the Congress, speak about profound belief in fundamental freedoms, and the fact that fundamental freedoms are upheld on the one hand by political democracy, and on the other hand by the observance and upholding of human rights. I think there's a really important message in there. Upholding human rights on the one hand is about political democracy, and there it's the parliamentarians like yourselves, like parliamentarians all over the 46 member states that once played a key role in founding the Congress here in The Hague and still play a key role in upholding the rule of law, upholding fundamental rights. It's a key role for civil society, because we should never forget that without civil society, none of the small steps taken by the European Court of Human Rights, by the Congress, would have been made. And on the other hand, it's about the upholding of human rights by each and every citizen, also in places where the war still seems far away, where the erosion of human rights still seems something for other countries. And I was really, really impressed and happy to hear our minister speak also about human rights in the Netherlands, about the reflexiveness that comes with the dialogue that the 46 member states present here have had with each other on making human rights a reality over the past 75 years. So let me keep it at this message on the importance of the everyday upholding of human rights.
Thank you very much, Professor Omer. Yeah. Precisely this, you mentioned this promise, right, of human rights, rule of law and democracy protection, let's say the ball of 46 you mentioned, and then the tension between that and of course the principles of sovereignty and independence that we have also discussing today. I think we'll come back to this also later much more on this very good point that you raise. Okay, now over to, of course, President Cox for your opening statement. Please, you have the floor.
I will not steal too many minutes because I already got a few, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. But the last thing that Barbara said, this is what I say in my context with ambassadors, with governments, with ministers of foreign affairs. Count your blessings and count your money. The Council of Europe, the construction of European multilateralism is not costing money, you are earning money each and every day. That you benefit from all these conventions that nobody knows. To mention all the 46 member states, Barbara, is impossible. To mention all the 220 conventions, it's not doable. But together, in 75 years, they have delivered a network that really counts. When I meet with representatives of government who are not, would say by heart, fully committed to everything that we would love them to be committed, then I say count. Count. Ask what it is delivering to your country, to your sustainability, to your development. When a country says, but if I have to commit myself to all these obligations, I better leave. And then I said, okay. Then ask investors. Then ask banks, what will the interest rate do? The moment that you leave us, your interest rate will grow immediately. There is a price to be won by being a member state of the Council of Europe. There is a price to be paid by leaving. I'm quite sure that Russia was, I think, surprised, taken by surprise that we were able, within one day, to suspend this biggest member state and to expel them within 3 weeks. They did not expect. I remember that on the moment that we were discussing the expulsion of Russia, we got a fax, Maria, from Minister Lavrov and saying, by the way, we were leaving anyhow. So they were taken by surprise because there are also clever people in the biggest country on earth. They realize that they will pay a price. Sanctions cost a price. Being excluded from the civilized society also costs its price. And this is also what we have to realize when we see all these beautiful pictures of the Congress of The Hague in 1948. We see a lot of famous politicians, as you mentioned them, Madam Secretary General. to be honest, the vast majority of them were not by heart multilateralist. The honorary president of the Congress was Winston Churchill, and we know Britain wanted to rule the waves, wasn't it, John? That was, of course, the idea, and the Netherlands wanted to do whatever we wanted to do. But the Second World War had shown to all these people who thought that their country itself could do what was the best for its citizens, realized that that had failed. Brutal unilateralism had taken the world, and then when these people came together over here, they realized whether we like it or not, whether we hate it or not, their only sustainable answer to brutal, unregulated unilateralism is multilateralism. How less sexy it may seem, how difficult it is. The Council of Europe, our Secretary General knows it exactly. It has to negotiate and negotiate because we need consensus, or we need at least a very large majority to participate in a decision. But it has worked. It does deliver. We earn money, and we earn, what's far more important, we earn security for our member states. If you reread the Statute of the Council of Europe, it's a short document, but it has a unique formula, and I think we should praise those who were here 75 years ago, realizing that if you want that the pursuit of peace, as it said in the preamble, is a precondition for a civilized society. And these are big words, but they were entitled to say because they had seen what a non-civilized society meant. 20 million people dead in a few years' time, and the whole continent in shackles, and the rest of the world as well. And in the following articles of the statute, it says, okay, the pursuit of peace is vital for a civilized society. Therefore, we need greater unity on the basis of cooperation, where each partner is equal, and we do it along the lines of rule of law, human rights, and democratic structures, to respect these three things. By doing this, each and every member state strengthens itself. And these wise people then realize the stronger a society is, the more democratic a society is, the more the rule of law is governing these societies, the more fundamental rights are respected, the stronger the society is. And we see it now in Ukraine. What is the big difference between Ukraine and Russia? In Ukraine, people believe that you were on the right way with all your problems, but on the right way to develop your society. And on the Russian side, of course, people in Russia realize they are not on that track. So by making yourself stronger along these lines, you make your opponent weaker. And by realizing that if you strengthen yourself as a member state, and also your neighbors strengthen themselves as a member state, when you are embedded within democracies, your security is far better protected. So the stronger you make yourself, the stronger the whole construction becomes, and the weaker the enemies, the unilateralists. That was a brilliant idea. And yes, the problem of brilliant ideas, to put them into practice, costs time, and often, as you said, there will always be mistakes made, but it did function. And I'm now very much looking forward, and then I close, that in Reykjavik, where we all will come together, I also convened a meeting of our standing committee to be present when our heads of state and government take their decisions over there, but that we are able there to reaffirm our commitments, but also invent creative ways to strengthen our societies, to include the right for a healthy environment as a fundamental right, to take decisions on the relation between artificial intelligence and human rights, so that we can also address the younger people of Europe to these fundamental ideas. I'm quite sure if we are able to do so, there will be a video made in Reykjavik, and within 75 years, perhaps other people, perhaps you will be there, but I will be somewhere in heaven, I think. But people will look to that video, or in hell, yes. I do not know the rule of law there. But that people will look to Reykjavik and to say, important decisions were made. They were very difficult decisions, but we are living in existential times. if we do not take the right decisions now, we know what the answer will be. And as I will not say what the result will be. I'm known as a too optimistic person in Strasbourg and at home. But here, if we do not prevent brutal unilateralism from becoming stronger and stronger, we are on the